Yeah, sorry about that. I don't think the Taliban destroyed all of those. I think that the Taliban never really got over into China. I know they destroyed a lot of stuff that was in Afghanistan, the same way that ISIS destroyed stuff that was in Syria and Iraq. That's not the cool things. You don't want to do that. Yeah. You're good. So it's been a week since we've done Adventures in History. I took last week off for American holiday Thanksgiving. I'm glad that I did. There was a lot of stuff that went down with family members and COVID exposure and emergency surgeries and recovery periods. Man, if I had been at work last week and had to stream last week, it would have been a truly rough week. It was okay. I mean, everybody's fine now. It was weird and just sort of all of a sudden and not really planned or expected. You know how stuff like that happens. It was very 2020 last week. So, yeah, I'm not glad to have missed hanging out with my friends, but I'm glad that I did not have to prepare for streams, and I needed a lot of that time to just kind of decompress. So, hope you all had a good break. I hope you all that celebrated the holidays were safe. Thanks, appreciate that, Half Design. Hope that everybody's doing okay and everybody is doing well and safe and all of that fun stuff. So the show is Adventures in History, where we talk about history and make it fun and make fun of it and make fun of silly pop cultural things and all sorts of people. It's just a goofy place. But we are doing a viewer request tonight. Viewer requests are put in by the very people in the room. These are requests that have come from stream chatters in the room. This particular one was put in by Paradox Moose, who redeemed the Name Your Own Adventure for 10,000 points. So tonight, at the end of the episode, we will actually be holding a vote on what we will do next. We haven't voted on a stream in about a month and a half, so I feel like we really need to open that up and let everybody that's in the chat vote on what we should cover next. And then after that, once we do one that's selected by the community at large, I'll turn the Name Your Own Adventure redemption back on, and we can take some more of those. So I know that there are people on deck that have ideas chosen already, and it's coming. Right now, you all probably can't see it because it's very fine, but there is a halo of puppy fur sort of floating around in the room here because the puppy is shedding really badly and has her head shoved into my lap right now. You can't see it, but like if you went straight here, there would be a puppy head in my lap. I'm currently scratching her ears. She's been having a rough go of things. Yes, it's cold. She doesn't like being cold, and she's had a lot of gas issues lately, potentially from eating leftover human food. And when she gets gas, it scares her. Her farts scare her. She's a very nervous puppy anyway, so she's been pooting a lot and having issues with calm. Mesozoic era. That's a little bit outside of my range. That's more of a paleontology thing. I mean, I could probably put something together on the Mesozoic era, but not a lot of human history from that point. I mean, I'd be up for it if people voted for it, but it would be all about dinosaurs and shifts in crustal plates and things like that. So, I once again have some tea. Earl Grey tonight. Enjoying that quite a bit. So, history of scary stories. It's the topic for tonight. Man, there is like a literal aura. It's like an area of effect of fur around the puppy. Yeah, I love tea. I've been in a very tea mood lately. It has actually become cool here in South Mississippi, which is a fairly rare occurrence. It actually, we had a frost last night. Last winter we had maybe 2 frosts or 3 frosts total. So we're starting early this year. It's supposed to frost again tonight. So I shouldn't say we. My wife got out and put covers over all the stuff in the garden to see if it'll hold up. We're crossing our fingers. Laughs in Canadian. Yeah. Hey, Asa. Is it cold over there in Georgia too? I love cold weather. Cold weather speaks to my inner Viking. And my inner Viking doesn't get out very much because, well, I'm not very murdery or pillagey or rapey. So my inner Viking really only gets out when it gets cold. And it gets to go, ha ha! Dropping into the 20s. Yeah, it's supposed to be in the high 20s tonight over here as well. So this is one of the areas where Shane and I disagree strongly. Screw the cold. It is legit cold here. You shouldn't be living in the South. Yeah, I know that's good. I don't indulge my inner Viking. I don't drink either. So, I mean, my inner Viking gets shut up a lot. I shouldn't be living in the South. Yeah, I do like living in the South for a few reasons. One, it's very cheap to live here. Hey, Joe, how's it going? Not a fan of anything below 70. Yeah. It's very cheap to live in the South. My family is all down here. My wife's family is all down here. And I feel like I do good here. One of my thoughts is that if I ended up going to teach somewhere like a New York or a California, I don't know if my teaching would be as impactful. I feel like people in certain areas of the country already have a pretty good head start on the sort of enlightenment principles that I like to talk about. So, and I know that there are people that are backwards everywhere. But we also don't have very high taxes down here. So, there's that. I actually think it's great, though, that it's cool outside and we can talk about bone-chilling stuff and we can talk about scary stories. So as what happens fairly frequently with viewer requests, they come in and I really don't know how I'm going to handle them. Usually if it's something that I pick, it's going to be something that I already know about to a certain extent, or sort of already have this mental timeline built about how I'm going to go about talking through this material. But when it comes to viewer requests, sometimes they're abstract ideas, sometimes they're individual things that I don't already have a sort of trajectory built for, like history of cheese or history of scary stories. So it took me a little while to wrap my head around how I was going to approach this topic, which I actually find fun. Mental exercises like that, I feel, keep me sharp. It keeps me on my toes. The more you teach something, the more you sort of fall into a rut and you develop these tropes. You always tell the same jokes. You always use the same examples. So shaking up the mix is interesting for me, and I like that stuff. So when we talk about scary stories, it's appropriate, in my opinion, for us to also talk about just society at large. And this is going to bridge over into one of my other big areas of interest, that of sociology. Because we need to talk about fear. And I'm not talking about fear as like Fear Factor TV show, more like fear as in the motivating factor that gets us to do stuff, right? So, and I'm also not talking about the Bene Gesserit Dune fear is the mind killer thing, though I'm now wishing that I would have somehow worked that into the story. Dadgummit. I come up with these ideas in the midst of things sometimes. Like, I missed an entire branch. I could have talked all about the litany against fear. I don't know if you all have read the Dune books. The Dune books. Sad Dune noises. I love Dune. The series itself is one of my favorite sci-fi books. Next year. Yeah. But here's the thing about them kicking Dune to next year. If they push Dune to next year and it comes out in the fall or the end of the fall of next year, there is a better than decent chance that I will feel at that point okay about going to the theaters again. Had it come out this month, I would not feel okay about going to the theaters. I would have not felt good about that at all. I would have felt bad about missing Dune in the theaters, and I would have felt bad about going to the theaters. So this, I hate the fact that I don't get to see it for another 10 months or so, but I think it's okay because I'm actually going to go see it in a theater, hopefully in the big screen with the surround sound and all that stuff. And we can all admire how dreamy Timothée Chalamet is. Anyway, so what's up with this concept of fear? Well, fear plays a big role in society. And this is partially because of how our brains work. Our brains are built on really old pieces of nerve clusters and sub-organs and organelles and things of that nature that do different parts. And there's one part of their brain that's called the amygdala. And I'm not sure if you know about the amygdala, but this little guy is the amygdala. And you go, what the devil is the amygdala? Well, it's this little piece of a thing that's in your brain, and it prioritizes threat levels to your body. And it's the home of your fight or flight reflex. And you've probably heard about this before. It's this thing. Yeah, it's running old software. It needs an update. Sometimes I feel like mine could definitely use an update. So your amygdala has this control mechanism inside of it that determines whether or not you are going to turn and fight something or run away from it. But that is triggered by threat and by fear. And people way back in history, way back in history, figured this stuff out. And I mean, they didn't know what the amygdala was, but they knew that there was this reflex inside of people's brains that could make people feel a certain thing. And they recognized that this sort of triggering of the brain, oh, David, it is not that. It is not that at all. But by making stuff fearful, you can literally train your brain. And people figured out that you could use fear as a tool to teach people stuff. And this is accompanied by the fact that strong emotions tied to memories actually promote the way that our brains hold on to memories. So this is why you can remember the big highlights of things, but not necessarily the in-betweens. You know, not everybody can remember the sort of day-to-day humdrum of life, but they can remember how they felt when they looked at their first child, or how they felt when they fell in love with their significant other, or the way that they felt when they graduated college, because we have all these strong emotions. But that fear factor thing is all about triggering that fight or flight reflex, but doing so in a way that you tie that fear with a lesson. And people figured out how to use this to teach people. And we're not just talking about teaching children here, but that is a very common thing. How many times do you hear stories that we tell children where we focus on the potential threat? Don't go talk to the strangers because the strangers will abduct you. Don't eat candy because it's got razor blades in it. Don't put your hand on that because it will burn you. This is supposed to trigger that brain reflex and make you go, oh, I shouldn't do that. Jordan Peterson enjoyed the book about how snakes helped our evolution of better eyesight. Well, yeah, and the amygdala itself first showed up back in lizards. And I refer to it a lot of times as lizard brain. When people do stuff, some people would call it a knee-jerk reaction, where they look at something and then they just freak out. They don't think it through. They just go with the fear. I call that lizard braining it. There's also fish stuff and snake stuff. Yeah, little red. Yeah, okay. Okay. So we're not just talking about teaching people that are children. We can also use this as a community building tool. Hey, Life of Mamba, how's it going? And we can reinforce our cultural norms and our valued behavior by telling stories that scare people. So what we can do is we can start using imagery that identifies a division between good and bad, between right and wrong, between us and them. And we can focus on this fear brain reflex thing that I've been talking about to promote certain ideas. We have to stand together, because if we don't stand together, those people are going to come and ruin our country. You've heard a lot of that lately. What that is doing is it's trying to trigger that amygdala reflex in your brain. They're trying to tell you a scary story because those people are trying to get your brain to react in a way that makes you feel a certain way so that you can follow these, what they're promoting as good values or norms. Just playing Among Us with Cryo. So Among Us is actually a game that's built around a very rudimentary version of this fight or flight reflex, this concept of fear, right? Because you don't know who the person is. This unknown is actually built around that we don't know them reflex. And we've been told not to trust things that we don't understand, right? Loner rules, you better learn your rules. If you don't, you'll be eating in your sleep. Right. Exactly. The bad thing will come and get you. We're coming up on Krampusnacht, the story of the demon that comes around and steals bad children and eats them alive, right? So we're trying to promote our values. We're trying to use this fear reflex to establish what our norm is, and how other people don't fit into that norm is supposed to make them different, and we're supposed to fear that. So much of cultural differences and perception is based around this fear concept. We don't understand something, we've been taught to fear what we don't understand, so we fear people, and that brings about hate and suffering and all of those other things that Yoda said, right? So fear is an important part of that. And when we are early humans, and when I'm talking about early humans here, I'm meaning way, way back into the prehistoric time periods where humans are first showing up. We could even push this back into hominid territory before humans even show up. There are certain things that are just intrinsic fears, right? We are afraid of isolation. And I know all the introverts out there are going, I'm not afraid of isolation. Well, you're not afraid of isolation being by yourself, but what I'm talking about here is being cut off from the pack, or from the herd, if you will. If you were isolated in your house with the internet, you're not really isolated. If you can order stuff and get it delivered to you and you don't have to talk to people face to face, that's not the same thing as being completely isolated. If I dropped you off in the middle of the woods and you had no connection to the outside world, you had no cell phone, no technology, you just basically had to survive, that's a fearful situation. That's the kind of isolation that I'm talking about. So we're afraid of being cut off from support networks. And that's pretty basic. We're pretty clear about that. We're scared of the dark. What's out there? We don't know what's out there. Wilson, exactly. We're talking about making a friend out of a volleyball so that we can pretend that we're not isolated. Making friends. I'm isolated and so is my wife. Joey, I don't know about that, man. I don't know what's going on, but I hope everything is okay in your marital relationship. So we're afraid of the dark. And what is ultimately behind both the isolation and the dark thing is sort of the ultimate fear, and that is death, right? We're afraid of not existing anymore. We don't know what happens when we die. We're afraid of not being around. We're afraid of dying in painful ways or even in quiet ways, right? There's much to fear that goes into the darkness and being away from fire, right? There we go. Okay, Brian. Oh, is that something that Brian from Family Guy said? I missed the reference. If so, I apologize. Or is that Brian? Oh, Life of Brian. Oh, okay. Oh, now I feel really bad because I should have gotten that one. Alas. Yeah. Oh, bother. Now I feel bad. Nerd points reduced for the moment. I have to do something nerdy to regain those by the end of the stream. Okay. I'll put that on the list. So, death is this sort of ultimate fear that everybody kind of has in the back of your head, which is why conquering fear is a hard thing to do. Everything sort of has this basic, again, fight or flight reflex that is based around survival, which is trying to ward off death. It's just really the way that it works. So what do we do as cultures to curb this? How do we answer the questions of this fear? Well, we create civilization, right? We group up, we live in cities, and we create religion. Because religion is the answer to the questions. And religion is designed to explain the unknown, like what happens after we die. Well, religion explains that. This concept of being alive or being dead and the difference between being alive and dead is a religious idea. It's a very proto-religious idea, right? Just the belief in spirits and the belief that there's something else on the other side is a religious concept. It's not necessarily restrained to one particular religion. But this concept of spirits, both in nature and as passed on humans, is actually going to go a long way towards making scary stories a thing, right? Because how do you tell a ghost story if there's no such thing as ghosts? And where do ghosts come from? The belief in the afterlife, which is an animistic religious idea, right? That we developed way back in human history and even potentially in things like Neanderthal history, right? And then after we come up with these religious ideas, they get more codified and we start developing the good place and the bad place, right? Because it's not enough just to think about religion and there being something on the other side. You have to figure out why you want to go there. Why do you want to follow the tenets of this religion? And what's really interesting and something that might be worth a whole other stream is this idea of what comes first. And if you look at the stories that people tell, and if you look at even early scripture from various religions, a lot of the times it's the bad place that shows up first. And then the good place kind of gets developed a little bit later. And why is that? Because the bad place scares you, right? You don't want to go to the bad place when you die. So that's triggering this same reflex. You're supposed to follow our norms because if you don't, you go to the bad place. And that might work on a lot of people, but it doesn't work on everybody. So then you invent the good place and you entice people to be good too. So when a mommy ghost and a daddy ghost get really drunk, do they get drunk on spirits? There we go. You ordered a chicken and an egg from Amazon. I'll let you know. Well played, Fid. That's great. By the way, I'm noticing that I'm dropping frames for some reason, so I don't know if that's my internet connection being wonky or something with the computer here. So I hope that I don't cut the stream and fall out of things. But if I do, just hang around. Make sure you track the order. Could be some funny business going on. Yeah. So, okay, so we come up with all the civilization stuff, but even in the midst of the civilization, we are creating the things to be afraid of, right? We're creating the scary stuff. Laws are punished by punishment because the punishment scares you into following the law. Or it's supposed to, right? So the whole concept of civilization is to protect ourselves from fear and to create power structures that are supposed to alleviate fears, but they create a whole different set of fears in themselves because humans are, again, very basically scared of stuff, right? Nobody wants bad stuff to happen. But what's interesting to me is that when we look back at even the oldest stories that we have, we see these elements of scary stuff, right? We see the things that are supposed to freak you out when you hear them. And to sort of emphasize this, I want to kind of talk about the first story that we have. And the oldest written narrative story that we have ever discovered in history is this story called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which origin is probably somewhere in the 2800 BC range. In the Sumerian region over in Mesopotamia. And I've mentioned this before, and you've probably heard of this before. It's a pretty famous thing. It comes from over here, what is modern day South Iraq and Kuwait, Mesopotamia region, Sumerian culture. The version that we have that's the most complete version is actually written down about 1,000 years later by a group of people called the Kassites in Babylon. But it's pretty clearly evident that it's older than that. We have pieces of it that are older than that. But this story can tell us about scary stuff and the role of scary stuff by picking up the things that are supposed to be scary in it. So if you've never read the Epic of Gilgamesh, I'm going to spoil the story. So if you want to read it and you don't know what happens in it, I'm going to ruin a lot of it right now. So I'm sorry. I feel like it's been out for 5,000 years. So if you haven't read it yet, I don't feel like I'm really spoiling too much. But the story starts off with this guy named Gilgamesh, who's kind of a bad king, and the gods decide to get him. And they do this by creating this thing called Enkidu. And Enkidu looks like this. Enkidu is a part beast, part man. You can see Enkidu here has a big woolly beard like a goat, and he's got big old ears like a goat, and he's Enkidu. Well, I'll type it here for us. It's it's not spelled that way. There we go. Yeah, Enkidu. So this is Enkidu, and there he is down there. So this guy is scary for a few reasons. First off, he is part man, part beast, and we'll talk about why this is a scary thing a little bit later on. But he's big and he's brutish, but he's described as this monster that gets released, and he starts targeting civilization stuff. He starts spoiling farmland. He starts pulling up traps from people that are trapping in the woods. So he's disrupting civilization, right? And one of the reasons he's so scary is because his actions show that he is rejecting civilization, right? So we're supposed to recognize that Enkidu is a bad guy and we're supposed to be afraid of him because he is rejecting our cultural norms, right? But Enkidu actually becomes a good guy because he accepts civilization. And you might ask, well, how did this man-beast thing accept civilization? Well, it turns out that he meets up with some prostitutes. And he gets seduced by some prostitutes, and they bring him back to the brothel, and they cavort for several days. And at the end of it, he goes, you know what? Civilization's not so bad. This is really in the story, by the way. So even though we're supposed to be afraid of Enkidu at the beginning because he's rejecting civilization, we learn the lesson that if we cavort with prostitutes, we'll be accepted and society will be okay. This is what Gilgamesh says, by the way. I want to make that clear. My frames are dropping really bad right now. I feel like the stream might cut any second. Okay, we'll just push ahead. I don't know what's going on with it. Maybe the internet's got too much pull on it right now. It shouldn't, but, you know, who's to say? Anyway, so civilization wins out against uncivilized nature. But that's not the only scary part. Enkidu and Gilgamesh actually end up becoming friends. And Gilgamesh kind of changes his ways a little bit with kind of being the bad thing. And so he starts also having these dreams. And in these dreams, he dreams about these really horrible things that are supposed to be scary, like earthquakes and storms and rampaging wild bulls and fire-breathing birds. And all of these things are supposed to be scary because humans can't control nature. Of course, we also can't control fire-breathing birds. If you can control fire-breathing birds, I really hope that you let me know, because that would be a really cool power to have. But these dreams of Gilgamesh are supposed to represent this concept of nature being bigger than humans, right? Nature is stronger and more powerful than us. We can't directly control it. We can't predict it. So, there we go. But Enkidu and Gilgamesh end up teaming up to take down this other big demon thing called Humbaba. And Humbaba is an ugly looking dude that looks like this. Humbaba is a demon that has magical powers. You can control every fire-breathing bird you've ever met. So Humbaba is this bad guy and he's rampaging around stuff. And so Gilgamesh and Enkidu go out to fight him. And in the midst of this battle, Humbaba pauses to threaten Gilgamesh. And he threatens him with these really specific threats. For example, Humbaba says that he's going to pull Gilgamesh's entrails out and leave him stranded in the desert, exposed to the birds who will come and peck at him. So, yeah. What is this supposed to scare us with? Again, we're isolated in the desert. We're wounded. We can't heal ourselves. We're exposed to the elements. There we go. Out of curiosity, how different are civilized and uncivilized society? At this period of time in history, it's becoming very, very evident. By the time Gilgamesh is written, they have cities of 10,000 plus people and trade that stretches over hundreds of miles. They have organized religion, organized government. There is a hierarchy of social classes. It's way different than the regular kind of quasi-nomadic people that would be living around them. So uncivilized to civilized at this point of time, even as far back as it is still a pretty big jump. think there was a massive outage in the U.S. earlier. I saw one guy I know said he would be able to, at least for 4 hours, could be after tremors in Mississippi. Yeah, it could be. Could be. Mississippi gets on the slow end of things a lot. So we'll see. If it hasn't dropped yet, hopefully it won't drop at all. But Enkidu and Gilgamesh defeat Humbaba, and he gets defeated and run off and killed. And this is not the last scary thing, because once all of this happens, the goddess who had sort of set all of this in motion that wanted to kill Gilgamesh in the first place, whose name is Inanna, you might also know her as Ishtar. Ishtar is a later name for her. She threatens to kill Gilgamesh too. This, by the way, is Inanna. And as you can tell, she's kind of scary looking herself. I mean, she's got this giant hat full of horns, and she's tamed a lion, and she's got wings, and she's huge. That's just sort of scary to look at by itself, right? So Inanna threatens to kill Gilgamesh by raising an army of the dead. So she's going to call back these spirits from the afterlife and reanimate corpses and send them out to kill Gilgamesh. That's freaky as junk. And why is that scary? Well, I mean, you gotta wonder, like, dead people are scary, and this is like zombies from 4,000 years ago. The reason zombies are scary is because they're dead, but they're still moving, and that's not right? It just doesn't sit well with our understanding of the natural order of things. And I did censor Humbaba's junk. I did. So even after this threat of raising the dead to fight, Gilgamesh soldiers on. But what ends up defeating Gilgamesh is the thing that we can't get over. It's that ultimate fear. It's the fear of death. Because his good buddy Enkidu dies. And Gilgamesh is faced with this reality that he himself will one day die. And so he goes to look for immortality. He goes to try to find a way to stave off the last fear. And he can't get it because death gets everybody, right? So in the end of the day, death is the final scary story. But what we can get from even this first most ancient of stories are all of those things that I talked about at the beginning. We can see nature being powerful and scary. We can see monsters that are supposed to represent uncivilized nature. We can see the threat of the living dead and the stuff from the other side and the supernatural. And we can get even the scariest thing of all, the ultimate cessation of life. And what we can see here is that scary stories go all the way back to the beginning of human civilization. And this stuff was meant to be shocking. It wasn't meant to be like, oh yeah, that guy just said, he's going to strip out your entrails and leave them out to the birds. You got to remember that in the ancient days, people thought this stuff literally happened. And they literally thought that Inanna, or Ishtar, whoever you want to call her, could raise armies of the dead. This is scary, scary junk, right? You don't want to make a god angry. So what we've seen from this and what we can see in other contexts are these sort of paradigms of things that we're supposed to be scared of, right? We're supposed to be afraid of ghosts or the human dead. And this is really closely tied to religious rites. So if we fast forward from Gilgamesh and we sort of look at this in a broad, like history, sort of all of history concept, ghosts and the dead usually have some sort of religious tie, right? So anytime you hear about a ghost story, it's going to be related somehow to the concept of life after death or stuff on the other side. And you are told multiple times through history that calling up ghosts is a bad idea, right? Communing with the dead is not necessarily a safe thing to do. One of the things that we can see in Sumeria, one of the ways that you would get treated if you went to the doctor, one of the things that the doctor would ask you is, have you been communing with evil spirits? Have you been trying to summon the dead? Because that was a surefire way to get sick. Some sort of supernatural ectoplasm junk would latch onto you and you would end up stuck in a bad state, right? But there is a potential benefit to talking to these dead people, because we are told in various stories that the dead possess lots of knowledge. And we see this in scriptures like the Jewish Bible, or what they call the Tanakh, where one of their kings goes to consult a witch who calls up the ghost of a dead prophet. We see this in Homer, where Odysseus, searching for wisdom, goes to the spirits of the dead. You mean like the Ouija board and Duel Monsters? Also, like Yu-Gi-Oh! You play the bad card that's attached to your life force, and it calls up the bad monster. That's a bad thing. It's really powerful, but there's a threat there, right? So you got to be careful with those contacting the dead stuff. So ghosts and the dead are very common in these stories because, again, they play this role of making us worry about what's out there. This is this sort of unknown human life concept. That Jewish king was totally not supposed to do that. Correct. And that's why it's like that you go to get the knowledge, but you are literally sinning against God, or Yahweh as it is in that particular story. Thanks, Mac and the Lab Coat, for bringing that up. I should have stated that earlier. This is a scary, bad thing. You're not supposed to go talk to these ghosts. You're not supposed to talk to these witches that can conjure up the dead. And of course, not just ghosts and the dead, but you also have monsters. Everybody's fun and fans of monsters, right? And these things are super ancient and they go all over the place. And I've got some fun images to show because I've been talking for a bit and I haven't shown a picture. So, about dragons, right? This is a Han Dynasty dragon that I thought was wicked looking cool because it's scary as junk. It's got humongous eyeballs and giant teeth and big claws. Yeah, that's a dragon. You know, these big things. But you have these big, giant monsters that are oversized in lots of different groups. You have these dragons in Chinese and Japanese and Asian mythology. You have the rampaging bulls of Gilgamesh and the rampaging bull that Hercules has to go kill. You have things like this guy. This is Jormungandr, who is the Midgard serpent from Norse mythology, who is the serpent big enough to wrap himself around the world. So I don't think that this is the origin of Kratos, Joe, but this guy is in the most recent God of War, the really weird white creepy looking serpent thing. That's Jormungandr. So you have these giant monsters, and these big frigging monster things are supposed to scare you for the fact that they represent things that are too big for humans to handle, right? And the reason that heroes become heroes by defeating these things is because they do stuff that should not be able to happen. So when Hercules goes and kills the bull, or he kills the rampaging lion, this is again supposed to show humans taking over uncivilized stuff, but this is supposed to represent the power of the natural world. And it's not so long in human history that animals have been a significant threat to our existence. Let's remember that humans are 220,000 years old, and we've really only had what we would call civilization for about maybe 5,000 of that. So for 215,000 years, we were at the prey of animals, big, honking, scary animals. And there's something very primal about being afraid of these big, scary natural powers that we can't get our minds around. Is that the story where the witch tests the king because she recognizes him and thinks that he's trying to entrap her? Yeah, so and another fun thing about this witch is that she's called the Witch of Endor, which I always thought was hilarious when I was a kid. Because, Endor, of course, being also where they hide the shield generator in Return of the Jedi, which ends up being a trap. It's a trap, right? So there you go. So you have ghosts, and you have the dead, and you have big old monsters, but you also have these weird animal-human hybrid things, and these show up all the time. Of course, you have your good old-fashioned minotaurs, who, of course, show up in Greek mythology that are half bull and half man. We are soft, peltless animals without claws and scary teeth. Yes. You died again, but you all know it was cryo. Tell her that Shane thinks she's sus. How about that? So, minotaurs, they're big, they're scary, they've got animal parts, they have an animal head. What's interesting sometimes is when you look at these big animals, these big animal-human hybrids, having an animal for a head, like the Minotaur has a bull's head, this is a very clearly representing that he thinks like an animal. He's got big, strong human stuff, which makes him freaky, but he thinks like an animal. And this is also where your vampires, and this is also where you get your werewolves that are kind of human, but also kind of not human. And this weird merging of animal and human is showing that humans can be uncivilized, right? Just because civilization exists now doesn't mean that it always exists that way. For 29 or 30 days out of the month, a werewolf is a perfect human. But for one night a month, that guy goes buck wild and kills everything in his path, because humans are unpredictable and we're just that far away from being uncivilized. And we have a dark side within us. And once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. And I feel like I'm just quoting Yoda all night tonight. But these animal-human hybrid thing... Oh, I forgot the Wendigo. And I got a great image for this guy. Because I was trying to pick stuff from all over the world. This is the Wendigo. It's a Native American animal. Human hybrid monster, where a person who does something horrible and kills an innocent person becomes a monster, and the curse is passed down by killing other people. So, the Wendigo is another part of this concept of we should be afraid of our base and human nature because we do things that's bad, right? So you can see how this is like literally ingrained. Yeah, like cannibalism. Yeah, cannibalism is bad, folks. You shouldn't do that. And then you have the supernatural stuff. And when I'm saying supernatural here, I literally mean the concept of non-human entities that have powers we can't control, like gods, like demons, like genies. These show up in scary stories all the time, because humans are small and the unknown is big, right? Hey, and Hunk, how's it going, man? I don't know. I guess I just looked past that. Sorry, Hunk. How's it going? So we have this unknown and we have bad luck. How do you explain bad luck, right? If I do everything that I'm supposed to do and I do it the right way, why does bad stuff still happen? Well, it must be because of those petty gods. Those gods that are trying to get back at me. If I do everything right and 8 million people, never mind. I'm not even going to make that joke. Sorry. We're doing pretty well tonight. We're talking about scary stories and why we get scared of stuff and elements of scary stuff and how all that stuff goes together. But bad luck and unknown stuff ends up getting attributed to gods and demons or genies or sprites or fairies or brownies or any of the yokai from Japanese culture. Anything that's unexplainable, that's outside of our ability to wrap our heads around, that's not a human. There we go. We are the playthings of the gods. Right, there we go. So this is the kind of stuff that can be scary too, because we can neither control it, nor can we really fully understand it. Right? So all of these things are very old. And that's, yeah, I hit the brakes on that joke. One of the things that I sort of discovered in my own brain as I came up with this discussion was that scary stories are a lot older than I thought they were, right? We think about horror as a genre, and initially I was just going to do the history of horror as a written genre, but then it occurred to me, no, that this stuff is really old. It goes all the way back to the beginnings of society, and even before that into prehistory, where we are afraid of certain things and we create stories to teach ourselves things and to impress ourselves with certain values and to correct people's actions and to designate us and them and the bad people and the good people and stuff like that. So with all of that groundwork laid, now we can kind of start talking about where this sort of modern horror genre comes from. And even that is older than a lot of people might think, because writing about this scary stuff is not something that's modern, right? We've already talked about people writing stories that have horror elements all the way back in 2800 BC, right? Beware of the elephant, right? the Oilifant, who is big as a house and gray as a mouse and crashes around. And I'm trying to quote Samwise Gamgee's poem about the Oilifant from that would be Two Towers. So I used to have a lot of Tolkien's poetry memorized, and I have allowed myself to forget it because that was really just way too nerdy. I'm never the killer. Okay, so we have these Western roots of horror genre kind of stuff going all the way back to the origin of writing. But when we start looking at the development of horror as a genre, we really have to come back to the medieval period. And that is mostly because the medieval period is where a lot of literary ideas originated in Western culture. Once Rome fell and everybody kind of calmed down a little bit and got more or less into the swing of things with, the barbarians setting up kingdoms and stuff like that, we started developing a more kind of unified Western culture around that point. And what we're going to end up with is a lot of hagiography. And if you're not sure what hagiography is, that's okay. It's a fancy word for stories about saints. Because one of the big things to write about in the medieval period was saints and the lives of saints and these great figures in the Catholic Church that did amazing things, that performed miracles, that stood up to the forces of evil. And people like St. George, who's not the Wendigo here, who's this guy, St. George. We can see him here killing a dragon because that's what heroes do. St. George killed the dragon. He killed the bad guy. And you see lots of stories like this. And this is not necessarily written to be a truly scary thing, but it is playing on the same level of brain activity. It's getting people to the mindset that there are big and scary and powerful things out there that you should be afraid of, but that the church and through the Christian God, you can conquer all of these things, which was an enormous thing during the medieval period, right? So another thing that we start seeing during the medieval period is people writing a lot of their history down again. So we have Rome and Greek history, and that goes until, when Rome falls in 476. And then there's like 400 years where people don't write very much history. But when you get to the medieval period, people are like, hey, we should write some of this stuff down. What's going on? Was it a baby dragon? It's shown in various sizes. It's not a baby dragon in the story. It's a big scary thing in the story. But yes, in that icon, it was very small and kind of puny. His horse was bigger than the dragon. But this is supposed to represent the power of God over the power of the devil. So the devil is small in comparison to the victor of God. So it's more of a visual story than the actual story. But we start getting a lot of these oral histories written down. And a lot of these oral histories are, believe it or not, mythology. You get stuff like the Slavic mythology that becomes sort of written down around this period of time. You get the Viking oral sagas that are written down. And of course, this is going to bring us to another great monster story in history, and that is Beowulf. If you ever read Beowulf, you'll know that Beowulf was this great king. Are we size shaming? It's not the size of the dragon, it's the intensity of the fire, right? I made that up on the fly, which is a dragon pun. Sips tea. Anyway, Beowulf, you have this guy who represents everything that's good to their culture. He's big, he's strong, he's a good king, he treats his men fairly, but he has to go up against this monster in Grendel. And Grendel is supposed to be this big, terrible, powerful thing that comes in and slays Vikings by the dozens, and yet Beowulf wrestles this monster down and rips its arm off. Because who cares about how scary this monster is? I'm bigger and badder. And then not only does he rip the monster's arm off, he chases it back to its home and then kills it and its mama. That's right, I'm going to kill your mama. And the big scary mother of monsters pleads for her life, but he does not do it because she's a monster and he's bad. And then he goes on to kill a dragon too. Like, how big and scary and crazy is all this stuff that he's got to fight? But he does it anyway because he's a hero. Yeah. Monsters, bad. Heroes, good. By the way, I feel like I haven't referenced the title tonight. As always, I try to make the title a pun. So we have Living on a Scare, which I thought was a pretty great pun. So I think that was a great one. Sometimes they come to me really easy, and other times I have to kind of bang my head against a wall to get a good pun out of it. But this was a pretty good one. So, bad Leroy Brown. Exactly. He's the scariest guy in the whole dang town. But there's actually a good, there's good scary elements in that too. He's meaner than a junkyard dog. And junkyard dogs are the cast-off refuse of society. And the reason that they're mean is because they're raised with very little on the fringes of society. So bad Leroy Brown being meaner than a junkyard dog is playing on the same sort of elements here. This guy is he's meaner than the meanest of the mean. So there you go. All right. So after the medieval period comes the Renaissance. The Renaissance and Ninja Turtles and all the good Greek and Roman stuff gets discovered again, and people get real excited. I thought you were going to go with Scary Stories to Tell I'm a Dork. That would have been a great one. That would have been a great one, and I would absolutely own being a dork. I have no problem. That guy that still sells stationery in Crocodile Dundee. So Greek and Roman stuff gets rediscovered. We have the printing press. Of course, the printing press is a huge deal for a lot of writing, and writing in general, because writing becomes easier to replicate, which means that the cost of buying books is going to drop, and the concept of reading for a hobby is actually a thing that can happen at that point. Reading prior to that was a discipline, which is why very few people could do it. When we're talking about the medieval world, we're talking about a world where maybe 5 or 6% of the people overall can read. And the Renaissance changes that because now more people can have access to the written word, which means that more people are going to write and more works are going to be produced. And one of the things that gets produced is actually a big book about how to get rid of witches. We found a witch! This book is called the Malleus Maleficorum. And this means the Hammer of Witches. So it's a big, scary book about how to tell who is a witch and how to defeat witches and how to do all of the mean stuff that, witches would do. And you can see the picture here that's actually a woodcut from the Malleus Maleficarum, which sounds, of course, like a textbook from Harry Potter, but it actually is an actual book. And if you want to, you can still go read this. It's still in print today. But you can see here the devil on a broomstick with a witch tempting a nice woman. Yes, that is a woman. Renaissance art wasn't all the way there yet, but, pretty close. So this is the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, or the Witch's Hammer, however you want to translate that Latin. Latin is a difficult language to translate directly into English. Anyway, this book is all about how to get rid of the scary things. Get rid of that scary stuff. Get rid of those witches. We found a witch. May we burn her? And reading for people who otherwise might have not been able to afford a book. Exactly. Is the Beowulf version with Angelina Jolie just Hollywood, or is that based on a different old version? Oh, Joey, I know you're joking. I know you're joking, and I know that you asked that question to get under my skin. Night out with the boys? Yeah, we're just going to go hang out with the devil and a witch. Hey, KP, how's it going? So, the Renaissance is a big deal. You get all sorts of books, but what we can see here is that even when we start coming up with books, this concept of what's scary and what's bad stuff is still there. Like, we're still writing books that are about the scary stuff. How to identify a witch, how to punish a witch. So what's the hammer made out of? Witches? It's a hammer to hit witches with, not a hammer made out of witches. Oh, man. It actually comes out of England, and it is one of the things that comes out of the early movement against hedonism and Satanism that was going to turn into what becomes the Spanish Inquisition and the Catholic assault against anybody that seemed not Christian, which also got a lot of movement during the Renaissance period. But after that, we come into this other big movement called the Enlightenment. Oh, the Enlightenment. Everybody loves the Enlightenment, right? Everybody knows the Enlightenment. Starts around the blah, blah, blah hundreds, somewhere between 1700s, which is Maccabeus. I don't know the Greek word for witch. What's the Greek word for witch? Are witches malleable? Anything's malleable if you hit it hard enough with something big enough. So there you go. So when you get to the Enlightenment, one of the big things that gets pushed out is this concept of studying and being reasonable and thinking about stuff. So you have a lot of morality stories that start showing up. You have stories that are designed to make you think about the right and the wrong. But what a lot of people don't know about, and this is actually something that I really have a fascination with, is that one of the things that becomes popular during the Enlightenment are these weird travel journals. And starting in the 14 and 1500s, and then carrying on through the 16 and 1700s, you have these travel stories where people will go to foreign areas and they will write all of these fancy tales. They'll go travel down to Africa and they'll write about the horrible sights that they saw, and they're supposed to thrill and excite the reader and go, oh man, that's so brave of that guy to go deal with all this scary stuff that's in India and China. And they bring back all of these stories about the native people being savages and horrible and mean. And of course, this is designed to promote the European view of the world, absolutely. And it's super biased and horrible. But the motivation behind it is, other than being, racist and horrible, is to make people afraid. Like, oh, look at the scary, scary stuff out there, right? Isn't that just called a blog? Magicica Maccabeus. There we go. Greek is such a funny language to see written down. My brain has to switch into Greek mode because some of those letters don't make the same thing. I'm like looking at that and I'm going, that's not a Y, that's a gamma. Magicica Maccabeus, which is hammer. There we go. So now you can translate the Latin into Greek and be really messy about it, like many other works written during the Enlightenment. So these travel journals talk about the unknown and plunging into the darkness and talking about all of these foreign stories and bringing foreign folk stories back to Europe and then translating them into European languages. So you get stuff that comes from these other areas that are their heroes. You get stories from China and Japan that get brought over to Europe and translated, and it's their ghost stories. One of the most famous collections of Japanese mythology that we have is by a British guy named A.B. Midford, who traveled over to Japan and got a lot of their ghost stories and brought them over to England. I know very, very little Aramaic, Fern. I'm a bad scholar when it comes to Aramaic. But you see this interest in what other people find common, right? These stories sell in Europe because they tell the same sort of stories that the Europeans already had from a point of view of another culture. So I want to know what the ghost stories are in Japan, or I want to know what the ghost stories are in India, or the big scary monster stories, or what are their gods like? Because there's a kinship in that, right? We can relate to that because we know what it's like to be afraid, and fear is the same for everybody on Earth, regardless of what color you are, where you grew up. It's the same mental reflex, right? So you see this concept of moving around the ideas. So the Enlightenment is a pretty big deal. But what comes after that is actually probably the most important for horror as a genre. And that is the period called the Romantic period, or Romanticism. So that's where the story of the ring came from, ancient phones and televisions. Well, that's actually a great point. How many movies come from Japan to America that are remakes of romantic comedies, right? How many Japanese sitcoms get translated into American? No. But how many Japanese horror movies get translated into American, right? There we go. How many zombie movies come over from Korea? I haven't seen Peninsula yet. So there's the movie Train to Busan, and there's a sequel called Peninsula. I've been told it's bad, so I haven't watched it. But it's the weird stuff. How much anime comes over from Japan that has demons or magic or trickster gods, right? And even the goofy stuff has the demons and the gods and the bad guys in it that use magic for evil, right? Death Note, dude's got a Shinigami and a journal, and it's scary because he's using logic and reason to kill people because gods, right? That show should have ended about 6 episodes before it did, but that's just me talking. Anyway, so Romanticism. This is something that happens in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And one of the things that happens in the Enlightenment is this gigantic push for rationalism. Everything's got to be rational. Everything's got to be logical. Everything's got to be up and down, left and right, forwards and backwards, and everything has to be rational or emotional. Well, Romanticism kind of got sick of that and went, like, can't we just write fun stuff? Attack on Titan? Yeah, there we go. Jesus and Buddha are roommates. Is there really an anime where Jesus and Buddha are roommates? That would be hilarious. I'd actually be interested in seeing if I could track some of that down. Death Note should have ended at the midpoint, but that's your take. I would have been happy if it ended there. I think that there was valuable stuff on the back end, but definitely once the bad guy... okay, so what is the name of this anime? Devil is a part-timer, Satan works at McDonald's. I've seen that one. Well, I haven't seen it. But I saw it on Netflix pop up and I read the description. I haven't actually worked at it. Or, I haven't actually watched any of it. Saint Onisan? That's Saint Demon-san, because Oni is demon in Japan. That's great. Cool. I'm gonna have to check that out now. Saint Youngmen. Mac in a lab coat for the win. Mac in a lab coat, by the way, connoisseur of anime and manga. Owns more manga than any other human being that I know on Earth. And has terabytes worth of anime. Had to buy a fighting game on Steam where lots of religious figures are the fighters, so you can use Jesus to beat up Buddha. Oh, man. Or the other way around, yeah. But Buddha is... Okay, I'm not going to get into the theological implications of that, so... I think I just have to suspend my disbelief for that one. Anyway. Let's talk about Romanticism. Anyway, so again, this is late 1700s, early 1800s, when the Enlightenment had burned everybody out on being so rational and logical all the time. People wanted to think about emotional stuff, and people wanted to reintroduce emotion to writing. And what is one of the most powerful emotions that we have, everybody? It's fear. Right. So what we see promoted during this period of time are emotional things that trigger adventure or that focus on fear. And one of the things that becomes very, very popular in the Romantic period is a revival of folk stories. These are, of course, the stories that you tell your kids when they're young to make sure that they act the right way. These are the Hansel and Gretels. These are the Grimm's fairy tales. These are the stories of where your families come from way back in history. Because another thing that was going on around this period of time is the development of nationalism, which plays into this somewhat, but we're talking more about a literary history here, not necessarily the cultural history. So, I missed a lot of stuff in chat. You remember hearing a lot of people upset about the game? I would expect so, especially if it has Mohammed in it. That would be a bad go right off the bat. It's more of a one-off type where you play drunk with friends. Emotions, weak. Weak it is an emotion too, though, right? Adventure, woo, adventure! It was a dark and stormy night. I was trying to close the shops. Then the evil one came in. It was a Karen. Right? But even that... So even the Karen, the trope or the meme of a Karen is not necessarily supposed to invoke fear, but it plays on the same level of mechanism as a social thing. It's a trope designed to express valued action and meritless action. Nobody wants to be labeled a Karen because they are given all of the negative stereotypes. So in a certain way, it might be said that if you don't want to be a Karen, you might fear being a Karen. I don't know if that's necessarily much of a stretch. But that story plays a similar type of role as a lot of these, even the Grimm fairy tales. You're not supposed to go wandering off in the woods by yourself if you're a child, because some witch will grab you up and eat you alive, right? You get stuff like The Little Mermaid, which is actually a lot more grim and horrible in the original version than the version that oh, Carindigo. Oh man. Do you turn into a Carindigo if you eat a customer service associate alive? Call of Cuthcarin. Oh, you guys. Good times. Good times. Hey, Crowmira, how's it going? You're a little late, just a little bit late. How's it going, Cryo? I heard you were super sus and you were killing Life of Mamba even though it wasn't him. Throwing innocent people out of the airlock is not a great way to make friends. Hope you're doing okay, Cryo. Doing the work thing means I miss most of your streams, which sucks, but I'll catch you Thursday after my stream, or maybe before my stream. Whenever I think you start at the same time I do. Mamba wants to be the killer so bad. He wants to be the scary thing. Pat. So with romanticism, we get this concept. Oh, I'm doing great, by the way. I'm doing pretty well. This week has been surprisingly restful after last week, which was surprisingly crazy, even though I had the week off. So you can get your revenge. He's plotting on you. You plotting on me, boy. Fair. So with this concept of romanticism, you get this new emotional thing, and you get people recognizing that fear sells. You could make books that are scary and people will buy them because they want to be afraid. There is this sort of like back of your brain thing that like gets that adrenaline running. It kicks in that fight or flight reflex where your brain fires up and you get that adrenaline rush. But then it's just a book and you can put the book down and you don't have any actual threat of death, right? But that's a selling point, and people realize that they can write stories that are specifically designed to make that little thing go off. And how do you do that? Well, you start writing about things that people are afraid of, and you see a lot of the really big names of what we would consider the first horror genres coming out. You see Mary Shelley, who of course wrote Frankenstein. But why is the monster in Frankenstein scary? Well, we can have a debate over whether or not Frankenstein is the monster or the monster is the monster. But the reason the Frankenstein monster is supposed to be scary is because it's this reanimated human. But we find out that the real bad guy is actually Victor Frankenstein himself, because he's playing around with death and trying to be God, which of course you're not supposed to do because that's scary and you're not supposed to do that junk. Existential dread, exactly. You get stuff like Victor Hugo, who wrote a lot of books that are going like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and you get H.G. Wells, who writes The Time Machine, which is actually really friggin' scary in certain parts. You get The Invisible Man, you get The Portrait of Dorian Gray. Why are these things scary? Why is The Invisible Man scary? Because it's a human being that can act with purpose, but we can't see him. And the reason that's scary is because, again, we have to remember that humans have this deep-seated dark side. And if you can't see somebody doing it, that means they can get away with it, which is crazy, right? Frankenstein is a good story. I quite like it myself. But you see stuff like Edgar Allan Poe, who starts writing during this period of time. Why is Edgar Allan Poe writing stuff like, horror, right? Like, why is The Telltale Heart scary? Because a guy kills a dude for having a weird freaky eyeball, And then it haunts him because killing people is bad, right? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? All of those, what we might call Victorian classics, are scary for the sake of being scary. And this is when the horror genre really gets started. So by the time you get to the early 1800s, around the 1830s, Romanticism is sort of in full flight, and you start seeing actual books that are written with the expressed purpose of making you scared. But that's not all that happens. One of the things that, and I talk about this because of the popularity of the show a few years ago, not everybody in the world at that time could afford these big books, though. You know, Frankenstein's a pretty big book. And even though with stuff like the printing press, and by this time industrialized printing, even then books were expensive. You know, you might get a book once a year. Ha! KP has already beat me to the punch. Yes. Because of the value of these scary stories. No, now you're stealing all of my good lines, KP. Yeah, you get people that are reading these big books like Frankenstein, like The Time Machine, like The Portrait of Dorian Gray, and then they're spinning off these stories into what is effectively Victorian fan fiction. And those are called penny dreadfuls because they cost a penny and they were dreadful tales, right? They are designed to invoke dread. Now, the stories that are in these little books, and they're not even really necessarily classified as books. A lot of them are mostly just kind of pamphlets or very, very short novellas. But you see these same elements being told in a way that, at a price point that everybody can get to, right? You know, you have kids that are scraping together money so that they can get one of these penny dreadfuls and they can all share it and read it together. But that should show you how popular that this stuff had already become. And I was really excited when the show Penny Dreadful showed up because I thought that they would take some of those little stories and kind of fill them in. And they did in a certain way because what they did was take a lot of that old Victorian stuff and mush it together in a kind of a fan fictionalized way. Hey, Crush, how's it going, man? Cryomir's going to the lurk. I don't have a lurk command. If you want to lurk around here, you just lurk. By the way, if you haven't already followed Cryomira and Crush Builds, you should go do so. Let me do the shout outs. Shout out the Crush. I hope if you've been around my channel long enough, you know that these people are cool and you should go follow them. If you don't know that they're cool and you should go follow them, they're cool and you should go follow them. You want to hear the spoopies? I'm doing my lurks how I wanna. Flipping the table. Lurk like this, punk. Right? Auto lurk. So these Penny Dreadful stories are really just fun little ways for people to get the stuff out there. Now, by the time we get to the 1900s, love the reiteration. You are great people. So when we get to the 1900s, we have a lot of development stuff. First off, when we see literary magazines begin in the 1800s, most of them are what we would call high literary stuff. Things like high drama, poetry, that kind of thing. Hey, Techman. But by the time we get to the 1900s, magazines had been around so much that there were beginning to develop these little niche stuff. So by the early 19-teens and even into the early 1920s, you start seeing the development of good old-fashioned pulp horror magazines, where you can go buy a magazine and it's full of a whole bunch of sometimes serialized, sometimes self-contained horror stories. And you get the rise of a second generation of horror writers, or maybe even the beginning of a third generation, depending on where you put a lot of these people on the timeline. But you see people like H.P. Lovecraft, who as a person is pretty friggin' horrible. Steve Sketches coming in hot with the raid. Man, greetings, Raiders. And once again, My raid alert did not go off, and I am now beyond officially hacked off at Streamlabs. Cause that stinks. People should be recognized, and there should be fun music and an alert that comes in. So I don't know why it's not playing my raid alert. Oh man! Dun 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 dun. Yours never goes off. Yeah, see that irks me though. Like the follow thing, and thank you by the way. And I need to go see who that was because I forgot already. Anyway, so I don't know what's going on with that. But hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Shane McInnes. I am a history instructor at college here in Mississippi. I've taught at universities and colleges for about 5 years now. I teach history. And my goal on my channel is to make history fun because it doesn't have to be stodgy and bad and stuck up, and it doesn't have to be an old dude standing on a stage with a giant beard, or it doesn't have to be a ghost in the Harry Potter universe, right? Zoical, thank you for the follow. That's what I do for a living. I think history can be super fun. What we're doing tonight is a viewer request episode. So usually every other Tuesday or so, I do episodes where viewers get to pick the topic. And tonight we're talking about the history of scary stories. And we've gone all the way back into prehistory and talking about how fear makes our brain do funny things and triggering our fight or flight reflex, and how scary stories can be used to teach people things culturally and help us figure out what the good values and the bad values are. And we talked about early stories like Gilgamesh and how they're monsters that eat people and rip people's guts out and stuff like that. And we've made bad jokes, and we've come up with monsters like the Carindigo, which is a blend of the Wendigo and a Karen, where if you eat a customer sales associate at a store, you become this giant monster that looks like a Karen. We do all sorts of crazy stuff here on the chat. I've quoted Yoda about 14 times tonight. I feel like, we did some Dune stuff at the beginning. What I can say about the channel is, if you think you might like some history, but you don't want to be taught to like some old weird guy up on a stage, come back by and hang out. We do all sorts of fun stuff here. You can throw stuff in the chat whenever you want to. Feel free to derail me. You can ask whatever weird questions that you want. There you go. So if you all do not know Steve Sketches is a great streamer who was doing some sketching tonight and playing some D&D on stream. And now my shout out isn't working. What the devil's up with that? Dadgummit, Streamlabs. Oh, there we go. Okay, kill me. But back to Lovecraft being a horrible person. Yeah, so we had just broached the topic of the 1900s, and we had developed the horror genre through the Romanticism period of the 1800s. But yeah, Lovecraft was a pretty horrible guy. He was a massive racist and a giant jerkface and not a good guy to be around. But he was a pretty big name in horror, and especially with these horror pulp magazines that started coming out in the early 1900s. This guy got a lot of popularity, and he got spread around quite a bit. So after these pulp comics, of course, the next thing that you're going to start seeing are the movies, right? And if you look at really old movies, there are a few really old movies that a lot of people know, right? Everybody knows stuff like the Casablancas and the, Maltese Falcons and all of that stuff. But what about the really old movies? Think about the oldest movies that you can think of. How many of those are monster movies, right? Like Nosferatu and Bela Lugosi's Dracula and The Wolfman and The Creature from the Black Lagoon, right? All of these scary stories start showing up in movie form for the same reason why horror was popular in the written form, because people like being afraid in a scenario where they know that they can be safe at the end, right? Yeah, basically anything that's in the public domain, well, there you go. You have Plan 9 from Outer Space, one of the most horrible movies ever that everybody goofs off and laughs at. It's supposed to be a horror movie, but it's absolutely not scary at all, which why it's fun. You have to own the road you're on. It's your own asphalt. There we go. So you end up with the growth of the horror movie genre, which of course now gives us movies that everybody thinks are supposed to be scary that I don't really find scary. I've watched so many movies in the past probably 2 or 3 years that people are just like, oh my God, that movie's so scary. Don't watch that movie. It's going to scare you to death. And then I watch it and I go, really? Really? Like Midsummer. Honestly, watched it, didn't think it was scary. Didn't even really think it was that good. Because I've seen The Wicker Man. And it was really just The Wicker Man with hot 20-somethings. And now I'm giving you the hot takes, and I probably should put the opinion hat on. But let me talk about horror comics, and then maybe we can talk about modern horror movies too. But you see horror permeating all of the little level of social commentary stuff. You have your pulp magazines, you have your pulp fiction. That's horror. You have your movie horrors, and you have your comic books that are horrors. How many comic book villains are horror movie villains? You see Frankenstein in the comics. You see the Mummy in the comics. You see ghosts. And some of the biggest names in comic books are like the Spectre, who is the spirit of judgment. You see all of these big bad guys show up that are supposed to be scary, and they portray the same levels of storytelling that even those ancient stories did, right? Why is you have to wonder? I have to wonder if the sci-fi Forbidden Planet movie Fable, if it was ever scary for its time. Could have been. I hadn't seen it in its time, so it's hard for me to think backwards, if you get what I'm saying. The X-Men fought Dracula. There we go. There we go. Dead Man, right? Dead Man's one of my favorites. Strange Adventures 205, first appearance. I'm a giant comic book nerd too, by the way, and huge comic book nerd. J. Jonah Jameson, right? He's scary because he represents unrestrained greed and media, which I think everybody can get behind and understand that that's kind of a horrible thing in the world right now. There we go. But J. Jonah Jameson Jr., oh, that's the guy that turns into Venom in the movie, right? Anyway, what we're getting at is that things are scary because they trigger our amygdalas. And we like that as long as we can control it, right? We enjoy horror movies and horror books because at the end of the movie or the end of the book, we can put it down and we can pretend like it didn't happen. But that same sort of mechanism has been used for tens of thousands of years in human culture to get stuff. Art of Lee! Holy moly! Panda roll! Hey, Lee. How's it going, my friend? And again, my raid alert is not going off. That's bonkers. I disagree. Stop. Panda time. Do 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 do. Dun 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 dun. Thank you there, Liliana Wolf. Thanks for the follow. Hello, everybody from Lee's channel. So many friends, so many friends. Hello, all of my friends. And Steve's friends came to... Dun, 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 dun. Thank you, Aloquin, for that follow. For those of you that do not know... Macienda! Dun, dun. Thanks for the follow, Macienda, and welcome for all of you to the adventure. Thanks, Shivers. Yeah, it was one of my favorite things. Like, I am not big on the art, so I had to find things off the net that I thought were funny. I'm really kind of hacked off at Streamlabs because this is the second raid that I've had tonight where the raid alert didn't actually go off. So let me play the raid alert, and Steve's group and Lee's group can just imagine this being for you all. So here we go. Well, is it going to work? There we go.
Are you not entertained? Is this not why you were here?
There we go. So thank you all. Thank you both for the raids. Lee, how was your stream? Steve, how was your stream? I didn't even ask. Did not even ask. And I'm a horrible streamer for that. I just went right back into talking about goofy stuff. So, Steve, how was your raid if you're still around? Lee, how was your stream? Lee was working on an art challenge. Lee is an amazing artist as well. Great stream to hang out in. Lots of goofiness, lots of great art tips. So, there we go. Are you not entertained? Exactly. Are there any scary stories with Game of Thrones? Yeah, there's the scary story of running past your source material and then trying to write 2 seasons of a show without source material and screwing the whole thing up. That's a horror story. I see your wee island on the map. Yep. Stream was terrific as always. Super chill. Cool. Lots of flirting. Aww. Scotland. Yeah. Okay, so for those of you from Lee's raid that don't know who I am, I apologize to the raiders from Steve who just heard me say this. My name is Shane McInnes. I am a historian by trade. I teach history at college. But on my stream, I talk about history in a way that is fun. We make bad jokes. We make horrible puns. We quote pop cultural references. On Thursday nights, I do a stream that is effectively history in chronological order. On usually every other Tuesday, sometimes more than that, we do viewer requests. This particular viewer request was the history of scary stories, and we've been talking tonight about what fear does to your brain and how it works in society and how scary stories have evolved through the history of time, talking about medieval stuff and ancient stuff and Enlightenment stuff and Romanticism stuff. Oh yeah, we've got some Scottish Gaelic speakers in the room. You all throw out some stuff there. Sugar KP, one of my best friends in the world, mod here, big in Scottish heritage, organizes the Highland Games in our state. So you all probably have a lot that you might be able to talk about. The other moose. History of the World Part 2. Well, this is more like History of the World Part X. So, all of that to be said, welcome everybody. And unfortunately, we are actually kind of wrapping things up with my portion of the stream tonight, but that doesn't mean we have to go away. In fact, there's a lot more stuff that we could do. For those of you that are regulars, you'll remember that below you in the chat, you have adventure points, and you can redeem those adventure points for lots of stuff. If you just rated in and you hit the follow, everybody can do something if you hit the follow because you get a number of points, and I've got stuff set really low so everybody can participate right off the bat. Social, there we go. You can follow me on Instagram and history stuff, but honestly, I am so bad at Instagram and Twitter. I barely ever post anything. The Discord, though, that KP just dropped is much more active. I post there lots. Definitely picture the 2 mooses doing a horny battle thing. Oh, horn battle thing. I added a Y there. That was a bit of a Freudian slip. Dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you, Mr. Fitzworth, for that follow, and welcome to the adventure. Don't forget your horseman pandas. All right, so the puppy of war has been summoned. So let me call the puppy real quick. Or did the puppy just go outside? I know I just heard the door open. Let me call the puppy. Here comes the puppy. Oh, and she's got her sweater on because it's cold outside. Hello, puppy. You want to come up here? You want to come and see me? Come on. Why are you going under the table? Where are you going to come out? Hey. Hey, come over here. Come over here. There's the puppy. Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, so much love. Hello, Kaylee. This is Kaylee, the puppy. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, little waggly butt. And then she's gone. She comes and goes at whim. Yes, I had to mute so that I could call and whistle the puppy. You don't want to hear me make bad little baby noises. Bad at Instagram. I didn't know you were a streamer as well. I am terrible at lots of things. That's accurate. She does have a sweater because it's very cold, and again, she's a little chicken butt. Night, Kryptonoid. Have a good one, my friend. It is the puppy. Sweet puppy. Yep. Okay, yeah, so she actually just came in from outside, so she's up front lapping water. We call it refilling the tinkle gun because she'll go outside and go tinkle, and then she'll come right back in and she'll drink like 2 bowls of water. Hey, there's an Athena. What else can we do? I could talk a little bit about the stream in general. Again, I'm a historian. I also do a lot of travel. The stream itself is set up in a very come and go kind of thing. I don't like calling them lectures. I like calling them conversations. I really do enjoy feedback from the audience. I have various goofy props. This is the opinion hat. So if you ever want to hear me go off on a rant about something opinionated, I put on the opinion hat. I think this makes me look rather opinionated. So there's that, something that you can do with adventure points. I have this guy, which is the adventure hat, which is the hat that I wear when I go out and do archaeological stuff. Because I am super pale, the white balance on my camera is not thrown off. I really am this white. So there we go. Sugar, take it easy. Have a good one. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. Dun da dun. Dun da dun dun dun. Thank you, Millie Stark, for the follow. The legendary cap of much opinion is exactly. I almost had to put it on earlier because I got to talking about horror movies that have come out lately, and I felt like I was getting way too far into the opinionated realm. Because so many of the movies that have come out lately that everybody says are super scary, I just don't find to be scary at all. What's the favorite thing that I covered in Scary Story Stream today? So I said this earlier, but I can go back over it again. When I first started trying to figure out how I was going to do History of Scary Stories, I really just thought that I would just do the horror genre, right? I would start with the 1800s and we would just kind of go 1800s, 1900s. But it's really a lot older than that. And one of the things that I did at the beginning of the stream, and by the way, I save all of my VODs. So if you wanted to catch up on what we talked about tonight, you're welcome to watch the VOD after the stream goes off. But I went all the way back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we talked about some scary monster stuff that's all the way back in the oldest story that we have from human history, which was written somewhere around 2800 BC, where there are monsters that like rip your guts out and destroy things and yada yada yada. So you gotta respect horror elements in stories that go all the way back to when humans first started writing stories down. And so that's where we started. We started all the way back at the beginning, and we've kind of come forward through time there. And I thought that was pretty fun. Oh man, I wish I could even pronounce that, and I'm not even going to try. I tried to learn Gaelic, and it lasted about as long as I could stand Duolingo sending me passive-aggressive announcements and reminders. I also found out that Duolingo's Gaelic that it teaches, even though it advertises it as Irish Gaelic, is actually Scottish Gaelic. Not that I have a problem against Scottish people, but my particular history, my personal heritage is through Ireland, and I know that there are regional differences there. So Gaelic is not a forgiving language. Duolingo actually passive aggressive? No, for real it is. It'll send you these little messages like, you haven't checked in lately. Just seeing if you're okay. And then like one of the last things that it'll send you is, apparently these notifications aren't really doing anything, so we're going to stop sending them to you. Scots Gaelic, yeah. So, yeah, my history on my dad's side goes back to Ireland. My last name is McInnes, which you can see from somewhere probably around here. Hey, Diggler, how's it going, man? Yeah, my history is... My last name is McInnes, which is kind of a made-up last name, because when we came over, we didn't even really have a last name, so they kind of made one up. So, son of the island is what my last name means. For those of you that do not know, we got Dirty Diggler in the house. Dirty Diggler is a Gundam streamer. Builds Gundam models on stream. Is way more technical about it than I am. He's like pro streamer Gundam stuff. I'm like, I just figured out how to get my camera to work Gundam stuff. Have a name with no history. Oh, it does have a history. It's just that when they came over in 1565, they didn't have a last name because they were kind of sheep farmers in Ireland and they had to make one up. So you're Macpherson. There we go. Random history fact. Millie Stark, do you have any particular area of history, or do you just want something truly random? Because I can do either. Diggler, my holiday was chaotic as junk. It was a mess, but this week is a lot better. So, doing okay. The Irish wore kilts too. So I could just do a random random history fact, and then if Millie Stark has a particular area of interest, I'd be happy to throw one of those in later on. Something about animals. Okay, so here's a random history fact about animals. Oh no, I've already told that one. I don't want to run it over. Oh, I could do the one about dolphins. So, Romans thought that dolphins were just innately happy beings. And they thought that meant that dolphins' body parts had innately happy sort of properties. And one of the ways that the Romans believed that you could calm down a baby if the baby was crying or fussy was to get a necklace made out of dolphin teeth and put that on the baby, because that would kind of imbue happiness to the baby. So, yeah. I don't know if that's necessarily the animal fact that you'd like. I'll give you another one just for fun. Dogs were the first animals to be domesticated, followed pretty quickly by cats. But the first animal to be farm domesticated was the goat, probably somewhere back around 9000 BC. So, oh, there's a pupper emote. Oh my gosh, that corgi butt. Yeah. My wife loves corgis, and especially loves the little goofy way that the corgi butts like wiggle when they walk. See ya, Night Sugar. Hope you have a good one. So, good times. So, one of the things that nobody else has been keeping up with... Oh, there's another popper. Look at there. I know lots of panda facts, but I don't know how many of them are what we would call historical panda facts. I know that... Well... one of the weirdest things that I think I know about pandas is that because they are so endangered, zookeepers try to encourage them to have babies. And one of the ways that they encourage them to have babies is that there is actual panda pornography where people have filmed pandas in the act and play it for potentially mating couples of pandas to encourage them to have more babies. That really exists. Yes. Yes, they do. And if you Google it, be careful because there are sickos out there. Panda Hub. Oh, man. Oh, man. That's great. Bring out the stripper panda. Oh no, the stripper panda. For those of you that don't know, if you've never spent any time on Lee's stream, he has an art picture that is of a very, and I can't even describe it. Lee, if you want to share a link to that, or if somebody with access to that image has that, you can feel free to share that. And Steve, if you're still around, and Lee, if you want to, please feel free to share social media stuff. If you have an Instagram that you want to share, you can share links to your Discord. Promote the crap out of yourself. If you came in and did me a favor, you are free reign, my friends. You do your thing. So, yeah, there's a random history fact. I feel in a generous mood, so we'll throw out some random facts tonight just for fun. But, yeah. Okay, so anybody else want to do point stuff? We can summon opinion hats. We can summon adventure hats. We can talk about what's going on in the news. We can do goofy stuff. There's all sorts of things down there. I know I'm not necessarily talking very much about the history, but we're pretty much wrapped up what I had prepared for tonight. But we always sort of riff here for a little while after I finish and kind of hang out with each other. What's in the news? There's a lot of stuff going on in the news right now. Oh yes, there's the stripper panda. Good gracious. You know nothing about what's happening in the news outside of politics. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's been a pretty rough time in the news lately. I'll talk about one particular in the news yesterday. It either happened the day before yesterday and it came out yesterday in the news, or it happened yesterday and it came out yesterday afternoon. I can't remember, but within the last 2 days. Thanks for the company. I need to hang out more. It's like History Podcast, but I get to yell at the streamer if they get something wrong. You can yell at me whenever you want to, Aza. You are welcome. You can yell nice things. You can yell rude things. It doesn't matter. I enjoy the camaraderie and the back and forth as well. So Iran's top nuclear scientist got whacked. Yeah, that's been there, but I do want to talk about something that I think has sort of slipped under the radar, because it hasn't. It's not from a sexy region of the world, and a lot of people don't talk about what's going on. But in Nigeria, a couple of days ago, a group of Islamic terrorists in a group called Boko Haram, and I can throw that up here for you. Boko Haram killed about 110 civilians in a little village called Koshobe. And the reason they did this is because Boko Haram had been perpetually stealing the food from this village, and they had the people of the village had arrested one of the members of Boko Haram who had been showing up to do this stealing, and they were going to turn him over to the authorities to go on trial, but instead the militants showed back up with machine guns and killed 110 people. Now, Boko Haram has not said that they were responsible for this, but everybody pretty much knows that this is what's going on here. So Boko Haram has been responsible for about 40,000 people dying over the course of the last 10 years or so. And they were the group that was responsible. I don't know if you all remember a couple of years ago, there were about 250 young girls that were kidnapped from a Nigerian school in the region. These guys are bad news, and they don't get a lot of traction in the United States news because, well, just to be blunt and honest, United States news doesn't care very much about what goes on in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, where our attention span is very, very limited. So we hear a lot about stuff that goes on in Iran and Afghanistan because we have what we would consider national kind of policy interest in those areas. But there are big, bad terrorist groups, not just in those areas. There are places like Nigeria, and places like Sudan and South Sudan and Chad. These countries in South, I can show you where this stuff is on the map. Let me zoom out a little bit. Throw up the borders. So here in Africa, we have this big country right here of Niger. We have this big country right here of Chad. This is Nigeria. Oh, I'm doing that thing again where I'm showing you where it is and you can't see it because it's not doing it the right way. But this whole region right here of South Saharan, Sub-Saharan Africa is where Boko Haram operates. These guys are bad, bad news, and they are killing people by the thousands. And there's a really good documentary about this group. And let me see if it's still on Netflix. I can't tell if I have to pull up Netflix, but the name of the name of the documentary is called "The Devil Came on Horseback," and it was on Netflix, but it's about Boko Haram, and it's already probably a decade or more old, which shows you how long this stuff has been going on. But if you want to know more about this stuff, check out The Devil Came on Horseback. It's a really good documentary. So, is there just specific parts of Eastern Europe being popularized through scary stories or myths? So Baba Yaga is a Slavic history. It originates out of Slavic mythology. And because the Slavic people spread out over most of Eastern Europe, places like Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. I'm doing that thing again. Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Balkans. The Slavic people disseminated around the 600s AD all the way through this area, and because of that, a lot of those areas have common folklore. Figures like Vasilisa the Wise, even Tsarevich, Baba Yaga, all of that stuff. Not on Netflix. So apologies if I thought it was on Netflix. I know I watched it on Netflix at one time. If you can find it, you should watch it. Yeah, you've seen them before. Your boyfriend used to follow a lot of the news. This is the stuff that I wish the modern portion of my history class covered. Well, Distortion, guess what? Anytime you want to, you can either shoot me an email, come hang out on the Discord, or come into the chat. I'd be happy to talk about stuff that comes on in the news, which is one of the reasons why I loved that idea of having a point redemption where we just talk about something in the news. You know her from Hellboy? There we go, right? Not on Amazon. Dun 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 dun. Now we have two Mises. Thank you, Mystic Moose, and welcome to the adventure. I can't think if there's anything else on Boko Haram that I know of directly, documentary-wise, but because, again, they don't really get a lot of traction, which is unfortunate because they kill tens of thousands of people. All right. Anybody have anything else that you want to talk about? Because I need to set up a poll. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. Can't find it on iTunes. That stinks. Where is it? The documentary is bizarrely available through Apple iTunes for $4. Okay. Can find it on iTunes. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here's what we do. Because this is a viewer request stream, and we just fulfilled a viewer request, it is now time for us to pick another topic to cover for a viewer request. So, what we do is we bring the second place winner from the last poll over, and it gets a second life. And then I take 3 more suggestions from the crowd, and it's usually just the first ones that I see. So if there's something that's history related that you want to talk about, throw it in the chat, and we will put it in the poll. So the second place winner from the last poll was a group called the Contra, who were from Central America back during the Cold War. It's going on the list, and I need 3 more suggestions from you all. And you get to tell me what you want to talk about, and then we'll all vote on it. So give me some ideas. What do you want to talk about history-wise? And it can be whatever history topic you want. It can be from modern history, ancient history. It could be a particular idea, a theme, a topic, whatever you want. Anything that people believe aliens did it. Okay, so so we've got aliens did it, music, and booze. So why don't we just do? Let me tweak the aliens did it thing to. Let's just do ancient aliens. Why not? And I'm gonna feel like I'm doing the aliens guy. I'm gonna put question mark. History of music. Okay. That's going to be fun. I already know some stuff. Here's a free one for you. Oldest musical notation that we have with a staff and a scale comes from the Vedas, specifically the Yajur Veda, one of the Hindu scriptures. And that's from like probably 1200 or so BC. Written down about 700 or so BC. History of music and history of booze. That's a good one. We'll just put history of booze. All right, so what's going to happen is I'm going to hit start on this poll, and at the top of your chat window, you're going to see a little thing that says poll. And if you click the down arrow, you get to vote, and you can vote on whatever you want, but you get 1 vote, and it's timed. We've got 2 minutes. That starts right now. Yes, I have seen that distortion about how Stonehenge was set up. It is most likely a big calendar, and it is set up so that you can track the rising of the sun and certain celestial bodies at certain times of the day. And we actually see quite a few of these popping up in different parts of the world. We did a viewer request stream a couple of months ago on the history of astrology, and I covered a lot of those ancient sort of megalithic stone structures. If you want to roll back and watch the VOD on that, you'll see a lot of that kind of stuff. there's a guy, you can't remember the name, but he was a Roman scholar who wrote about how amazing the Germanic people were. That was Tacitus. Tacitus wrote a couple of stories. One of them was basically the history of his father-in-law, and he was sucking up to his father-in-law. And one of them is the history of the German people. So there are a lot of people in stream and not a lot of people voting. So everybody gets to vote. It doesn't matter if you are here for the first time. You don't have to be a follower. You don't have to even care. You don't have to show up for the next one. But you get to vote. Tacitus did not write about the 12 Caesars. That was Suetonius who wrote the 12 Caesars. Roughly the same period of time, though. Manhattan has a hinge. It does. I saw that, where the sun comes up on the blocks. You're cool, man. Not many people would have known how to correct you on that. I'm just a weird history nerd, and I know all of these random off-the-wall things. So you are welcome. Suetonius. He's an interesting fellow. He wrote pretty horrible things about some of the emperors. He especially did not like the emperor Tiberius. He said that Tiberius, when Tiberius got old, he went sort of crazy and moved off to this island and would stay in the bath all day and would train children to swim around under the water in the bath with him and nibble his toes and his fingers like they were little fish, which is creepy as junk. Whether or not Tiberius actually did that, we don't know. Has anyone been annoyed by the monolith not actually being a monolith? Yeah, because it's made out of metal. Mono means one. Lith comes from lithos, which means rock. It's not a monolith because it's not a rock. All right. We are coming out with the Contra. And we've got history of booze and history of music tying for 2. So I get to break the tie for the tiebreaker, and I'm going to vote for the history of booze. So we will carry history of booze over next time. And so the next viewer request stream will be on the history of the Contra from the Cold War, and we'll talk all about Iran and scandals and guns and whether or not the president was in on it and Oliver North and all of these great people. Contra was a hard game. The history of Contra speedruns. I don't doubt that there is that. There are a lot of documentaries about games and stuff like that. Random things, but you can't remember the names. Hey, that's cool. That's why you have a history professor on speed dial. You could just go, hey, what was that thing? And I could go, oh, you mean that thing? All right. So our next viewer request is going to be on the history of the Contra, and that will be done not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after. The Contra was in a jungle. Yes, Nicaragua. 20 guys. History nerds unite. Woo! And you can thank both Steve Sketches and Art of Lee for bringing in a big group. Thank you very much again. I appreciate everybody that's come in. But we have had quite a few follows tonight. And for those of you that have been in the stream for a while, you know that a certain thing was going to happen once a certain number of followers had been amassed. And as of right now, we are at 301 followers. And that means that, true to my word, at some point in the very near future, I will be doing a history of Middle Earth. Yeah. Now, as a note, this is not the history of how Tolkien's stuff was written. This is going to be the actual history of Middle Earth. And that is going to come out pretty soon. I have already been thinking about it. I know how I'm going to do it. It's not going to be all of the history of Middle Earth. In fact, it's only going to be the very beginning of stuff. And I'm going to do that because I want to drag this one out a little bit. I want to give people encouragement to continue sending friends this way and having them follow the channel. I chose followers instead of subscribers because I don't want this to be some sort of monetized thing. I don't want people to feel like they have to give me money. Money is not why I'm here. I'm here to try to help people learn some stuff, to make the world a little bit better, have a good time, hang out with folks that are generally like-minded, and that kind of stuff. So we will be doing History of Middle Earth very soon. I haven't figured out exactly when I'm going to do it, but it is coming. It is coming very quickly. And we'll talk about Iluvatar and the songs and the creation of the Ainu, and the original creation of the world of Middle Earth and all of that fun stuff. So thank you all that have come in and followed for helping us meet that goal. And you are now part of this historical event. I'm probably going to work up some new stuff that would pretty clearly delineate this History of Middle Earth stream from a normal history stream, because just to be honest, it's a different kind of thing. I'm doing fictional history and not actual history, but there we go. A history of Arda and the Vale. Yep. We're probably going to stop at the rising of the stars. We might go all the way through to the trees. I'm not 100% sure. We might get some Telperion and Laurelin in there. I like Middle Earth a lot, by the way. I read Lord of the Rings every year. I have done so since I was in the 3rd grade. I read the Silmarillion every other year. I read The Hobbit every other year. And I've started including the Children of Hurin in there too, because, I like that stuff. Diggler, have a good night too, my friend. Everybody that likes models and just wants to hang out and have a good time, again, go hang out and give Diggler a follow. Melon. Say friend and enter. Chronicles or something. Yeah, I've got to play around a little bit with the stream jargon so that which book in the Ring trilogy is your favorite? Gotta be Return of the King. How do I have time to read that much? Distortion, I am a giant nerd and I read really fast. One of the things that I have trained myself how to do is read real fast. And I read stuff all the time. Also, I don't sleep very much. I have not slept very much since I hit my growth spurt in junior high. About 6 or so hours a night is a long night's sleep for me. You struggle to finish a book in a year. I usually read Lord of the Rings in about 2 weeks. Sometimes I've read it in as short as 4 days. It really just depends on what else is going on. It took me a while this year because I'm also studying to get another master's degree. So it took me about 2.5 months this year to read through all of it. But I did read the Silmarillion before. No, I read Children of Hurin before that. Before I got into that. I wonder how many books I've read this year. I'm on book 12 of the Dresden Files. So I've read all of those. Lord of the Rings, and I've read some sociology stuff. Sociology. I'm getting another degree in sociology. Because it's going to allow me to teach more classes in college. So, which is going to be a good thing because having flexibility in the future is going to be key, especially because colleges are not going to be around forever. And when they start going down, I want to be the guy that can teach everything. Because, that means I'm hard to get rid of. Flex, exactly. Okay. Anybody want to do anything else? Anybody want to redeem any channel points? Ask any questions? Thank you all so much again for hanging out. We don't have to go right now. We can hang around a little bit longer if you want. But I'm going to start looking for somebody to raid. Somebody to raid on. Aw, Cryo, thank you for hanging out. All your susness. And again, if you don't know who Cryomera is, you should totally go follow her. Awesome art streamer, cool person, friend, good streamer. I feel like maybe we should go somewhere that we haven't raided before. Summon the Adventure Hat. Okay. Dum-ba-da-dum. Scariest thing from my travels. Well, you all have heard me, and Cryo has actually... I'm glad Cryo is here for this, because I think she would get upset if I told the story without her in the room. It's time for the AK-47 story. So for those of you that don't know, again, this is the Adventure Hat. I wear it when I go on my travels abroad. It's been to 10 different countries, 3 different continents, and I love it with a love that I should not give towards a physical object. And when I tell stories of things that I've done and adventures that I've been on, I wear the Adventure Hat. So when I was in Jordan, let me show you over here where Jordan was. I was in Jordan in 2015. This is the country of Jordan right here. And as you note, Jordan has a border with both Syria and Iraq. And when I was in Jordan, there was a little group called ISIS, which was the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And ISIS territory was right here. And I was with a group of students and another professor, colleague of mine, and we were going out to a region that was right over in here. You can see that this is kind of a mountain range right here. Well, in these mountains, there are some caves. And in those caves, there is an ancient Bronze Age copper mine that you can actually go out to, and you can still see where the people, even 4,000 years ago, were chipping copper out of these mines. And we were very excited to go see this. So we are in 2 4-wheel drive SUVs, and there's not a road to go out to this place. You have to know where it is, and you have to drop a GPS pin, and then you have to just drive towards the GPS pin. It's all over land, and it's really kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So we are driving out to this copper mine, and we notice that on either side of us and behind us, there are big rooster tails of dirt, meaning there are other vehicles. And we really don't think anything of it because there are Bedouin people that live out in this area, and they occasionally have vehicles that they drive around in. So we just think, it's some Bedouins. But then we notice that the vehicles on the side of us are getting closer, as is the vehicle behind us getting closer. And before we know it, we have been basically boxed in by 3 pickup trucks, and out of the pickup trucks boil a whole bunch of guys carrying AK-47s. And we're the ones that they're pointing them at. So we immediately cut off the vehicles, and we're putting hands out of the windows, and my Arabic's not that great, and my colleague's Arabic is only a little bit better. And we are yelling the term that we hope are going to be the ones that sell, like Americans, 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 Americans. Yeah. So we all get out of the vehicles, and we're being held very directly. And like, this is the don't make quick movements kind of scenario. And the guy who is pretty clearly in charge of the group, and by the way, all of these guys are dressed in sort of official looking outfits, which was actually a good sign for me, and I unclenched my butt cheeks just a little bit. Had they been in mismatched clothes, we would have been in much worse shape. But we find out through exchange of broken Arabic with broken English that they are Jordanian border patrol, and they were worried that we might be running either guns or women to ISIS, because there had been a lot of movement across the border between Jordan and Syria right here, with people running stuff up to ISIS. And they initially thought we were smuggling goods across the border. Yeah, so we were not being treated nicely at the beginning. Here's the point where the story turns. The lead guy of this group had a satellite phone, and he got on the satellite phone with the kind of head of the Jordanian border patrol people, and they called over to the United States Embassy in Jordan. And luckily, we had registered not only all of our names and all of our passports with the American Embassy in Jordan, but we had also given them a copy of our itinerary, where we would be at any given day and where we were going and how we were going to get there and all of that stuff. So the American Embassy was able to communicate with the Jordanian border guard that, yes, we had told them about a month ahead of time that we were going to be going on this specific day to this specific place with these specific people. And at that point, they holstered the guns, and they told us that we were not going to be able to go all the way to the copper mine because the area was just too active, and they drove us about an hour back out. And what really stinks, we could see the rise, like the hill where the cave was. It was only about probably half a mile away from where we were, and we didn't get to go. But that is the scariest moment that I have ever had on a trip abroad. It was terrifying, and as my dad would say in one of his southern colloquialisms, if you had put a lump of coal between my butt cheeks, it would have come out a diamond. That was freaky stuff. But it's also super great story. And I had resisted telling that one for a long time. So Joey, congratulations for asking the proper way to get that story out of me. But we're all fine. We were all great. And the guys were super nice after they figured out that we weren't gun runners. But that's also probably one of the most Indiana Jones moments that I've ever had. Like if I had a bullwhip, I might have been able to like break out an AK-47. Of course, then I would have been shot by the other like 12 guys that had AK-47s. But yeah, that was good stuff. And fun times. And we even laughed about it later on that day. But in the moment, it was scurry. Oh man. So there's a good adventure hat story for you. Probably one of the best ones that I have. Yeah, I would have died immediately. There would have been no question. I would have totally died. Okay, so let's go do a raid, and we're going to go raid somebody that we've never raided before. And as I like to explain, one of the things that I like to do when I raid is that I like to either take people to places of streamers who have raided me so that I can reciprocate the favor and we can spread everybody's love. Or I like to take people to places that I have never been before with a raid so that I can expose my viewers to as many different people as possible. For those types of excursions, definitely a good point to be in good communication with the embassy. Absolutely. That really did save our bacon. So that was a good move on our part. The embassy is our friend. Yes. Have I seen the movie Hector and the Search for Happiness or read the book? I have not. Should I? And you can't explain more without spoiling it. No, I have not. I have neither read the book nor watched the movie. But perhaps I should. So one more time, just for everybody, if you are new to the chat and new to the room, if you would like, we do have a Discord where we hang out. I post weird history news stuff that I find. I share memes all the time. We, have fun and goof off on there. You'd be welcome to come swing by the Discord. That is where I am most socially active when I'm not on chat. You can also find me hanging out at other people's streams. I really do enjoy the Twitch community. I love a lot of people here. They've done great stuff to help me promote my channel. So luckily a Disney cruise doesn't require such level of communication. Yeah, but a cruise puts you in threat for coronavirus. It's like a giant petri dish. Simon Pegg is the lead. You've sold me. I am sold. I'm a sucker for a Simon Pegg movie. Okay, so we are going to go raid Art of Blake, who is a great art streamer. We've never been able to raid him before, usually because either he starts after I'm done or I don't hang around long enough to catch him. So I'm very happy to be able to drop you off in Art of Blake's room. He is a great artist, a really cool guy, and a new dad. So when we get into his room, our battle cry or our raid cry is just adventure. And we will yell adventure as loud as we can. And we will throw up some adventure hats if you got them. If you want to, you can unlock them for pretty cheap. Otherwise, again, let me hit this button and I'll say the goodbyes. Thank you all so much for hanging out. All of our new followers tonight, thank you for coming in. To all of our cool people that have rated us, thank you, Steve Sketches, for bringing in